Welcome to the Cinema Australia podcast with Matthew Eels.
Come on!
2020 is going to be the first time ever that skateboarding is an Olympic event.
Are you guys skater girls?
Yeah. I hope to qualify. I'm so excited.
Hayley Wilson, the Australian champ.
Ava Godfrey,
Top 3 in the country.
How about Charlotte Heath, a force to be reckoned with?
Do you want to win the Olympics?
I want to be the best in the world.
Looking back at those little girls from 8 years ago, is there anything you'd want to say to them?
You don't know what's to come.
I'm joined by 12-year-old Olympic hopeful.
A lot of the other sports will have age limits, whereas skating doesn't. You're throwing a very young person into a dog-eat-dog situation.
There is pressure and everyone wants a piece of you.
She's got to go next level.
They have to perform.
She was only in primary school.
I think I spent $2,000 to get here.
It's their last chance to qualify.
Coach was treating me like shit. I wasn't speaking to my parents, but I felt like I had to keep going.
Is everything okay, Ace?
And this pressure just building.
She stopped hanging out with friends.
How nervous are you?
This is her entire teenage experience.
This is not just a contest.
I'm excited to make Australia proud.
This is the Olympic Games.
Oh my God!
It's not what skateboarding should be about. You know, to just go skate with friends and have a good time. As soon as I stopped skating, I realised I'm an actual teenager.
I did it to make other people happy.
First place once again.
I really want my own life now.
Are you in love?
Well, not yet.
Cop out.
Yes. You don't have to be the person that everybody wants you to be. Just trying to figure out who you are and where you stand.
I get a feeling of freedom.
That's the trailer for Queens of Concrete. Hello and welcome to the Cinema Australia podcast. My name is Matthew Eels. In this episode, I'm joined by Eliza Cox, a filmmaker who has dedicated years of her life to making this exceptional new documentary. Shot over 8 years, Queens of Concrete chronicles the journey from childhood to adulthood and the moments that define us. It's 2016 and Hayley, 14, Ava, 13 and Charlotte, 9 are following their dreams to qualify for the first ever Australian Olympic skateboarding team for the 2020 Games. The three girls are strong contenders, but they face crushing life lessons as they navigate heartbreak, betrayal, a global pandemic and pressure beyond their years. In this interview, Eliza gives us a generous insight into the making of Queens of Concrete, discussing the early beginnings of the film, when she first met Hayley, Ava and Charlotte, and the challenges she faced dedicating so many years of her life to this one single documentary. As a viewer, I can assure you it was worth it. Queens of Concrete is already one of my favourite films of the year. Queens of Concrete recently celebrated its premiere at the Melbourne International Film Festival and will now head to the southwest of Western Australia for Cinefest Oz, where it will screen at the festival from Sunday the 1st of September. Queens of Concrete will then release via Madman, so keep an eye on cinemaaustralia.com.au for updates on that. Anyway, enjoy. Eliza, thank you for joining the Cinema Australia podcast. It's great to have you on.
Thanks very much for having me. It's so good to be here.
You're welcome. Congratulations on Queens of Concrete. Your portrayal of Hayley, Ava and Charlotte is highly engrossing. The film plays out like a roller coaster of emotions, and I'm wondering if it's their compelling stories that had me completely absorbed in it, or the fact that I'm a parent myself and that I was thinking so much about my own children and their futures that had me hooked in this film. You've created a seriously special documentary here, so congratulations again.
Thank you. Thanks. Yeah, it's I feel really lucky to have, had the story fall into my lap and, to have had the privilege of following them all this time. It's something you don't often get, the opportunity you don't often get. So thank you. Thanks.
You're welcome. It's a terrific film, and it's having all of this success at the moment on the festival circuit, and it's been picked up by two of the country's biggest film festivals, which I want to get into a little bit later. But to begin with, I want to go back to the beginning of your career, which I do with this podcast, just to let our listeners know a little bit more about you. And this question might seem a little bit off topic, but I did find it interesting. I've just interviewed Matt Formston and Daniel Fennick about their new sports documentary, The Blind Sea, and both of them have ties to Optus. And here I am chatting with you about your sports-themed documentary while you have ties to Telstra.
I do.
I always find those synchronicities to be quite interesting. But I guess I want to ask you, as a filmmaker, how imperative is it that you have a stable income while pursuing a career in film? I think it's important for emerging filmmakers to know about.
Oh, absolutely. And I've done it both ways in terms of I've freelanced as a cinematographer and videographer for like 5 or 6 years, and I've also taken on casual jobs. I worked at Man with a Van as a removalist for a couple of years as well, just so that I could have that flexibility to keep working on this film when I needed to. But ultimately, I was given this job at Telstra as a writer, and having that relief of the stable paycheck, as well as creative and rewarding work in its own sense, just took so much of that mental anguish away, and it really freed me up. I knew what my routine was. I knew that I was going to have money coming in. It was quite a long time between funding rounds for us, and so there were years where we didn't have any funding. So knowing that I could float like a shoot if I needed to is really what kept the film going. And not that I'm angling for a paycheck, but my bosses have been really amazing in terms of giving me flexibility to finish the film. I've also been really supported by the whole design team there, given talks about filmmaking, because the crossover between what I do day to day and filmmaking is actually really apparent, and there's a lot of overlaps. So it's been super interesting. But for sure, if you're starting out, I wouldn't even try to put pressure on myself to survive as a filmmaker. Just get any kind of job that will give you some routine and give you some finance, and see how you go.
So while you are working this, day job, for lack of better words, how much is the film consuming your mind during that time, or are you able to click off and focus on what needs to be done?
I feel like the last 6 to 12 months while the edit has been going on, it's been its own beast. I have been, there are times when I'm taking meetings during Telstra days, or like during my Telstra lunch breaks. And the juggle is really hard at the moment. It's pretty exhausting, but also I'm at this really unique part of the film where it is about to be released. So of course there's a bunch of things that need to be done and exciting things that need to be done. I do try and time box as much as I can. So I'll say to the producers and the team, like, I'm working between 9 and 12. I'll check my messages again between 12 and 1, and then I'll check in again at 4 and 5, because if I don't time box, things just go, anything can happen, and nothing gets done, and I don't perform in either role. So, but besides the hecticness of the last 6 to 12 months, I have been more or less able to contain it to film work after my day job. So I'll work 9 to 5:30 at Telstra, and then work during the nights or the weekends on the film. And again, over the 8-year period, it hasn't always been that intense, but there's always something to do when you're driving your project,
I could imagine. Thanks for sharing that with us. I think it is a great insight into, the realities of being a filmmaker, and especially in Australia, it's something that you need to do.
Absolutely. And it is really hard to keep that drive going sometimes, and that motivation.
So sticking with film, can you take us back to the very beginning of your filmmaking career? How did filmmaking come about for you?
I started with an interest in journalism. I did like a journalism bachelor and was always really interested in human-centered stories. My family was always watching Enough Rope with Andrew Denton and like reading Good Weekend Features and that kind of thing. So that natural curiosity in people and life was always there. And so from there, my I just found writing not quite as visual or creative as I would have liked it to be. So from there, it was a bit of a natural progression into exploring documentary. Went overseas, did the whole couple of years off in the UK kind of thing. And then when I came back, I started at the VCA as doing a master's in documentary. And I didn't know anything about film then. And to this day, I'm not really that much of a film buff. It's probably not what I should be admitting, but it's something I've really had to work on in terms of growing my knowledge, especially about Australian film and TV and what's going on and what's being made and what's being funded. But so I made a bunch of short films at the VCA, and one of them in particular did pretty well. It was called Compass, and that screened at St Kilda and Heart of Gold, and then ended up at Palm Springs, which was pretty amazing. And then the feature that I'm working on now began as a short film as well, and that did well too. So this is my first feature. I'm like very green coming out of film school, but I mean, that was like 2016, so it was a long time ago now. I guess it's more of a reflection of the journey and how long it's taken to make.
Yeah, I'm very interested to hear you say that you have a background in journalism, because I guess one thing that really stands out with this film is that you're not scared to show both sides of this story, you know, the positives and the negatives. And I think sometimes, especially with Australian documentaries, some documentary filmmakers tend to stick to the more positive side of a story rather than a more balanced approach to their storytelling. The journalism really comes through here. Would you agree with that?
It's nice to hear you say that, because it's something that I have really tried to focus on. I think the audience knows when you're presenting just one side of the story and can turn them against you, I think, sometimes as well. Yes. And audiences aren't ignorant a lot of the time, especially frequent cinema goers. They're usually pretty cluey, and especially now with all the stuff that's on Netflix, like documentary series and things on Netflix, people are starting to catch on that even documentary comes through with the filmmaker's bias or some kind of bias. So I think the least you can do, and the least I can give the participants in the film, is just to be as honest as possible and let the audience make up their own mind about what's being portrayed.
Yeah, you've done it. You've done it very, very well. You mentioned the short films there, and I'm just wondering, you know, they have both of those short films that you made previously have sporting themes as well. Were you an athletic person growing up?
I have unfulfilled dreams. I did well at school sports, I loved it, and I've always wanted to pursue, I would love to be playing AFL, and I surfed growing up, skated growing up, and I ran the half marathon on a couple of days ago, my first one. So my family is quite sporty, and we've always been pretty active, but I never quite reached the heights I wanted to get to. So this is me living those out.
I did read in an interview that you did, I think it was for the St Kilda Film Festival, that you also dabbled in skateboarding at a young age, but you broke your leg and back. Are you happy to talk about that?
Yeah, I'll go into it a little bit. So we were a friend and I were on our way to meet some friends for a skate one night when I was about 17, and we were in a car accident that was pretty serious. And so that put me out of action for a while while I was recovering. And this is a long time ago now, but by the time I was healed and my leg and my back and everything all fixed and back to normal, a lot of my girlfriends had moved on from skating, I'd say. We were also, coming of age ourselves, getting our own licenses, and so, moving on from one thing to the next pretty quickly. But that's essentially why I didn't keep skating, because by the time I was better, none of my girlfriends were doing it, and I was just a little bit too intimidated to do it myself at the skate park. But it was a different time in skating then, and I also grew up very regional coastal town, so very male dominated in both surfing and skating.
Thanks for sharing that with us. And it's also great to hear that you completed that marathon recently. That's amazing.
Thank you. Yeah, it was easily one of the most painful things I've done in my life, but it was nice to tick it off the list and nice to feel, strong and fit after, the knee and the back issue. So it's all part of my plan to be red carpet ready for MIF, so it's paid off well.
Oh, that's great to hear. So I do want to go back to those short films that you did mention there. One of them was called Daughters of Doom. Would you say that film is a prologue of sorts to Queens of Concrete?
Yeah, I mean, the film touches lightly on that time period itself. We kind of start at the exact same time that the short film starts, in that it's 2016 and they've just announced that skateboarding is going to be in the Olympics. But that short film is certainly what springboarded the feature, in terms of wanting to follow the girls keep on going over that 4-year period, but also gave us an opportunity to see what they were like in front of camera and get a sense of the tone of how the film might feel if we were to pursue it. I didn't really know it at the time that I was making it, that it would end up in this long feature doc journey, but it became pretty evident as soon as it was done, that, the appetite was there for it and that it was a bit of a gift, really. Like, as long as the girls were up for it and I could find a crew that were willing to come on, then it would be doable. And it was.
Yeah. Just from you saying all of that, I've got so many questions that are swirling through my head now. So I hope I don't jump too far ahead, but I'll try to stay on track here. I did try to find that documentary Daughters of Doom, but I couldn't find it anywhere. Is there anywhere that listeners can see the film?
We took it down just because it's close to a duplicate of what's going to be in the feature. So we're just sort of trying to preserve that footage a little bit. I'll have to chat with producers and see what they think on that one. But Daughters of Doom can't be found anywhere at the moment.
Yes, so I'm wondering about Queens of Concrete. It's such an incredible film. What piqued your interest at first to get started in this documentary? Was it skateboarding itself, or was it the 3 young girls?
It was skateboarding. I there was a couple of things that sort of came onto my radar all at the same time, and one of them was that I was dating someone at the time who was a skater, so that, like, just being sort of in that world again reminded me of when I'd been in it as a teenager. And I also knew in the back of my mind somewhere that there'd been talks about bringing skateboarding into the Olympics and that they were soon going to make an announcement. So this is 2016. And then also I was at Clifton Hill one day and I saw this woman who looked about my age skating at the skate park, and she was ripping. Like, she wasn't just pushing around, she was really good. And I just thought, wow, like, she's the one that stuck to it, throughout all the intimidation. And I wonder what it's like now for women in sport, or women in skating specifically. So all of that sort of converged onto the idea to just explore what skating was like for young girls, how they're finding it. And that is how the short film started, and what we thought the focus of the feature might be, in terms of gender inequality in male-dominated sports. But the film ended up becoming much more than that, and the gender inequality isn't so much at the forefront anymore. It's more of a background environmental theme, I guess.
You mentioned there about skateboarding becoming an Olympic sport in 2020. Was that overdue, in your opinion?
That's a good question. I wouldn't say so. I don't know if anyone really, in some ways, like snowboarding, for example, a sport, an extreme sport ending up in the Olympics can seem like a natural progression. I mean, I can't speak for skateboarding or the skateboarding community. Like, I myself don't identify as a skateboarder, but I would say that while the Olympics has been great for women's skateboarding, it's provided equal opportunity, equal prize money. The teams have to be made up of the same amount of men and women, so that's been awesome for that. But from what I've heard and the people I've spoken to, skating in the Olympics isn't really seen as big a deal as some of the other comps. It's just another comp on the circuit. So they still have the X Games and Street League and Dew Tour and things like that. I think there's a possibility that over time it will grow to something bigger, but skateboarding also has this whole other side to it that isn't competition at all. It's more the traditional side of skating, which is video parts, magazine like interviews and things like that. And that's what it has been traditionally. So there's still two very distinct paths that you can take, and competition, while there's a lot of money in competition now and, publicity, it's not the be all and end all for skating.
Yeah. And it was interesting for me to hear during this documentary that those two forms of skateboarding are labelled. There's street skateboarders and then there's park skateboarders. Have I got that correct?
That's for the Olympic format. That's how they distinguish them.
Yeah, right. It's a very interesting world, skateboarding, and I guess it's like filmmaking as well. It's very important to have a community around you. Can you tell us about meeting Hayley, Ava and Charlotte for the first time?
Yeah, sure. Gosh, that's a great question. When did I meet them for the first time? I would have gone to all of their houses independently. I can't remember. Oh, the like first day of shooting with them is very clear. But in terms of how I found them, I can tell you a bit more about how I found them.
Yes, please. Yes.
Yeah, so when starting the short film, I knew that to really grab an audience, and especially to get the respect of a skating audience, they would have to be good skaters.
Yes.
And so I had a look online at all the local leagues and local ladders to see who was doing well consistently. And those three names continually came up, with maybe one or two others. And then eventually but I wasn't really too sure how to go about it and how to nail them down. And then I drove around to a few skate shops, and there was one skate shop in particular, and a woman by the name of Vivi Van Koomen put me in touch with Hayley Wilson, who they were sponsoring at the time. And then after that, and then from there I met Ava and Charlotte. And it was always really important, again, to me to have like a spread of ages, so that we'd really be able to explore the experience of growing up at different times. And so, having met them, knowing they were good skaters, I could already kind of see the different, I guess, shapes their characters could take. Like Hayley from the get-go was always a prodigy, a street skating, she's always been the top female street skater in Australia. And so that was a bit of a no-brainer. Ava was a super cheeky, fun, St Kilda local, also very talented, lots of character and charisma on camera. And Charlotte was, just this tiny little thing, like adorable, also a really good skater, and also very charismatic in front of camera. So it was kind of easy. It was just down to me to get to build a relationship with them, really, and be a bit of an idiot with them on camera and to loosen them up. So I guess, does that answer the question?
It really does. Yeah.
Okay.
And I'm looking forward to talking with you a bit about how you managed to extract these stories out of these three. But you mentioned the first day of shooting there, and that your memory that's quite clear. Can you talk to us about that?
Yeah. We were down at Riverslide Skate Park in Melbourne, and I remember there was a girl skating, and the crew were like, there's someone over there, she's really good, is that Hayley? And I was like, no, I don't think it is. Like I would know if she was here. And so we're like setting up, talking through shots and things like that, and then it turns out it actually was her. And then she was just like really keen and up for anything. And Ava arrived and had like a whole box of, she was sponsored by Globe, so a whole box of like Globe gear. We were like rifling through for things for her to wear, and Charlotte had this tiny purple pink helmet on. And it didn't, I was like an idiot at the time. I knew they skated different different styles, but it didn't really occur to me at the time that Ava and Charlotte being park or bowl skaters, we were at a street skate park, so of course they weren't really going to be able to show off what they wanted. But yeah, we shot for the morning there, and then we went to Easy's Diner in Collingwood, and yeah, just sat them down. I really wanted the vibe to be a bit of like a 90s skater grunge vibe. So specifically chose that diner for that. But a lot of it, like, they were kids, so they were pretty uninhibited, and as long as they got a skate in and like a bunch of lollies, like they had the day off school, so they were already pretty excited. So yeah, it was organized chaos, that's for sure.
From the get-go, could you personally relate to these three in any way? Was there anything that stood out about them that reminded you of yourself?
Yeah, I would say it's a good question. I think with Hayley in particular, I could tell, like, she was the oldest one. She was trying to, I guess, give me what I needed, and I guess shepherd the girls a little bit for me. I could tell she was wanting to do a good job, which I relate to, and she's also pretty disciplined, and yeah, I can be like that a little bit to a fault as well. So yeah, I could just sort of tell she was she had that conscientiousness about her, which I related to, but I also just wanted to be like, mate, it's okay, have fun. Like, we're just here to shoot and make a short film. Like, it's not I mean, and maybe she was. I just, yeah, I could see some of her in me. And then also Ava was just so cuddly. Like, she just wanted to play all the time. And that also, I also can be a little bit of a kid as well. So yeah, I just, Ava's like energy really helped bring the other two out. So yeah, she was instrumental in that too.
Yeah, and I feel like with Charlotte, there's probably a little bit of Charlotte in everybody, really.
Oh,
She
absolutely.
seems so playful and just happy to be involved.
Yeah, exactly. Just that childlike energy is important even as adults. So yeah, she was easy to shoot, really. She was super charismatic.
How long did it take for these three to open up to you? Was there a particular moment where you realised that you had their full trust in what you were doing?
Probably at different stages. There's been times over the years where maybe I haven't seen them for a while, so I'll have to really work on relationship building again, and that quite often means not shooting and just hanging out with them or showing face or being at comps just as a reminder that you're around and that kind of thing. The bit that you see in the trailer with me stacking it down the ramp, that was like during COVID or whatever, and I hadn't seen Hayley in a while. And I just felt like I knew that I was going to have to make an idiot of myself to break the ice a little bit. Yes. And so that's how that came to be, that stack. And I did that 3 times and it worked. We had a really great chat afterwards. And yeah, that's something we always laugh about now. But certainly, yeah, there have been times over the years where it's just something I've had to work on again and again. And also doing it authentically, like not like building that relationship with them because I care, and not doing it just so I can get good stuff on camera, you know?
Yes, that's right. That's right. And I do have a question here about the psychological approach to dealing with people so young. But before I ask you about that, how did the parents respond to you wanting to make a documentary about their children?
They were really on board. They loved it, you know, like they just want their kids to have every opportunity. So I remember after the short film was made, and my team and I had already discussed the possibility of going on to make the feature. We got everyone together in a park in Fitzroy, and like all the parents were there, and we gave them all a sheet of bullet points of like, this is why we want to make this feature film involving you and your families and your kids, and this is what it would look like. Because it is a long feature film, there will be points when you get annoyed with us, you don't want us around. et cetera, et cetera. But if you're willing, then we'd love to have you on board. And yeah, pretty much everyone that day said, yeah, let's do it. So I think, yeah, I mean, I'm not a parent, but the feel I got was that they just wanted to give their kids every chance at success. And as long as the girls wanted to do it, then they would be up for it too.
Yeah, that's great. And did you get along with all of these parents? Were they happy to be involved at any time?
Yeah, they were. There were times, you know, when we had to negotiate a little bit in terms of when I was going to be around with a camera and when I wasn't going to be, and occasionally would have to say, like, look, like all the girls at a particular age, around the 16, 17 year mark, like everyone, and including myself, got over it a little bit, and and just there was a bit of pushback, and that's just a matter of having a conversation with them and with their parents and giving them, like, they all had chances over the years, and we're constantly having conversations. Like, if you guys don't want to do this anymore, that's totally fine. Just let us know. Like, it's not a big deal if you want to bow out of the project. And but again, it comes back to that relationship and building that trust with them, and as well as knowing when to let them push back on having us around, and when we need to say to them, look, if you can't give us a little bit more access, we don't have enough footage, and we're not gonna be able to create like an accurate and like thoughtful and I guess a just picture of you guys. So like the more material we have, the better chance we have of creating a story that you're happy with, which I know sounds rough, and I know and it is, but it comes back to trust and having that relationship with them and just ongoing conversation, really. Yes.
You're listening to the Cinema Australia podcast on SoundCloud, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or at cinemaaustralia.com.au.
I'm not sure how relevant this question is, but can you talk to us a bit about adapting your psychology and approach to dealing with people so young?
I mean, I don't know that that there was too much adapting going on, because I hadn't, up until then, I had only made a couple of films myself, but it became apparent that, you know, the girls being so young are obviously not articulate at all. And so a lot of like what they might say is not going to be what I want them to say. And I also never really wanted to be on camera at all, or like involved in the film at all in terms of like my voice being there. But it just became apparent that because they're not actors, they're just normal kids, I would need to be there to guide them through it and to relax them. And there was really no getting around me not being present. And so just had to sort of suck that up a little bit. And I think that was the right call. And just something I have to get used to. But as they got older, they certainly became more articulate, and I was able to step back a little bit. And it was also about, I guess, coming back to the showing, not telling, and not necessarily relying on them to tell the story, but just shooting enough, knowing that we had enough footage in the can that once we got into the edit, we'd be able to show their story and not have to rely on them telling it themselves so much.
Yes.
So yeah, one of the best bits of advice I got from Eddie Martin was just to shoot as much as possible, and don't really even think about it in terms of trying to craft a story. Like, keep their characters and things in the back of mind, but overshoot as much as you can so that you've got plenty of opportunity in the edit. So that's what we did.
How many hours did you end up shooting?
Well over 100 for sure. I know we have about 11 terabytes of footage. So yeah, I couldn't have done it without the editors and the assistant editors, Steph O'Brien, Delaney Murphy, and Ramon Watkins, and Jordan Giusti and Louise Mullins. They just wrangled all of that in record time. I'm so glad that wasn't me. Yeah, it was a lot.
Yeah, you're filming people on some incredible highs here, throughout their lives, but there's also these severe low points throughout their lives as well. Do you have to restrain yourself, just as a human being with humanity? Do you have to restrain yourself from becoming too involved in their lives?
Yeah, I do. But I'm not that good at it. There have been times when I should have been more supportive and gotten around them a lot more, particularly that when I went to London with Hayley when she was about 16, I was in my head, I was so fresh out of film school. I was just like telling myself, don't intervene, don't intervene, don't intervene, like stay objective. When I could tell she just needed support and someone to be there with her. And I did try and check in on her, like, "You all right, mate?" Blah, blah, blah. But at that point, we didn't really have the relationship there. But I've said to her since then over the years, like, "Oh, I'm sorry that I wasn't more supportive to you then." But then equally, like, there have been times when I have been too involved, and my producers have said to me, "Eliza, it's not your job to handle this for them. Like, you need to step back and look after yourself as well." So, but it's impossible not to, especially when you've been following them for this long, and it is a weird spot to be in because I do, obviously care for them and want the best for them. I'm not a relative, and I do have a stake in their story as well as a filmmaker, so I'm not unbiased. I definitely have my own bias there. So again, I think the only way you can really deal with that is having that ongoing conversation with them and also with their parents, and saying, like, if the girls say to you they want out, that's totally fine. But then also in the lead up to the MIF premiere, we've brought on like a child, like a film and entertainment counsellor, and so that the girls have someone there while they're dealing with the limelight and the film's premiere who is totally unbiased, so that they have someone there to talk to who can support them and can advocate for them, someone that isn't us, essentially.
That is so wonderful to hear. That's fantastic. I think that's essential. So it's beautiful to hear that you guys have organised that. That's terrific.
Yeah, it was something the whole team was really passionate about, and something that we just knew, like, very early on. Also because it's scary for anyone. It's to have your life, a 90-minute snapshot of your life put out there is like, the courage of the girls is phenomenal, and I feel very protective over them. Very protective. So it was just something that was very, very obvious that had to be done.
Yeah, and then to have 400 people asking questions about their lives afterwards as well.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's something we're working on managing too, just so that because they do, go through some really dark periods. So just going to have to, something we're going to try and manage so that they don't feel put on the spot.
Yeah, I've been involved in many of these, post-screening Q&As, and audiences do have respect for this kind of thing. So, I'm sure that they'll be fine here. But, it is something that you have to keep an eye on.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's good to hear, though. I'm glad.
The film spans 7 years. That's an incredibly long amount of time. How confident were you that you were going to be able to follow this one through all the way?
Oh my God. It never started as a 7-year project, put it that way. It was always going to just be 4. Then obviously with the Olympics being postponed and a couple of other delays, we just realized it was going to be more beneficial to release it around this time with the Paris Olympics happening. I just knew that the story was strong enough, and we'd already shot it and made it on a shoestring anyway. Like, if nothing else, we're definitely going to finish it. And if no one sees it, that would be a shame, but at least it will be finished. So I always felt like it was going to be finished. I just never knew when or how and what the result would be. So, yeah.
I know that this might be quite a dramatic question, but was there ever a time when you thought you may have to pull the pin?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
The Olympics being postponed was Yeah, pretty devastating.
Yeah.
Already by that time, I was really ready to move on to something else. I felt like the film had been consuming my life too much already. And yeah, even in smaller moments when we're trying to nail someone for an interview and they don't get back to us, or there's a bit of conflict or something, it's hard to keep going. But and the reasons to keep going aren't always the right ones. Sometimes it's if I stop now, I'm not going to have anything to show, or it's fear of, failure. But equally, like there are also other perhaps more noble reasons to keep going, in that if I stop now, like I still really believe in this message, like who's going to tell it? And if I stop now, the girls and the team and everyone who have put so much time and energy into this is going to be for nothing. And so there are like questions I've had to ask myself, like if I keep going, is it going to affect anyone negatively? Is it too much for my family, for my friends? Like, is it too much for the girls? What's it going to cost essentially to keep going, and is it worth it? But for whatever reason, for all the reasons, the ones that I wish I'd seen a film like this when I was my age. So that's essentially what has kept me going.
Yeah. And look, you've created this incredible film here. Sometimes things, work out for the best, and you have to trust the process.
Exactly. And like I have to say, without sounding like a total wanker, sorry, I don't know if I can say that. Like I couldn't have done it like without my team, the producers, Gina and Oscar and CJ and Anna Kaplan. They've just been with me every step of the way, and they're holding the film up in some ways now. That like they're the ones that are making it happen and saving it from total failure. So yeah, couldn't have done it without. Like in some ways, I think it's harder from their position to be following, because I get to have all this nice media and the glory and people and being named as the director, but like they're following my dream and my story. So of course it would be infinitely harder for them sometimes to follow me all that way. But obviously I should say now young women, Hayley, Ava and Charlotte and their families, like couldn't have done it without them either.
Yeah. And my next question was actually going to be about this crew that you've assembled here. How do you convince a crew of filmmakers to take on such an expansive project?
Millions of dollars and an Oscar. No, I don't know, to be honest. Like I think I met Gina and Oscar at the VCA. We all were in the same class together, and I guess we were at the time in our lives when we were ready to take something on, and we wanted to really prove ourselves with a real project. And we all knew that it was going to be hard. We didn't know it was going to be this hard. But I think we've never had any issue in pitching the story. The story itself has always been strong enough to attract interest and attract support. And I think they themselves have believed in it. And I shouldn't say, doesn't really have anything to do with me. I think it's more their belief in the story and what we're doing and the importance of it. And they've been able to, they're just as invested in it as I am, and just as invested in seeing it succeed. We've all put our lives on hold to a degree to get this done. And so, I guess they've been able just to dig deep and find their own reasons for doing it.
Yeah. Did you have much of a crew on the ground, soundies, things like that?
It depends for what kind of shoot it was. I sort of always knew that if it was just going to be observational shooting with one of the girls at their house, it was going to have to just be me. Because as soon as you bring someone else in, it just dilutes the intimacy by like 50%. And we did try and fight that for a little while, in that we would try and have a soundie in there, because inevitably, being so green, we would stuff something up. I always stuffed the sound up, and it just got really frustrating. So we did try and bring someone in, but over years, as we made mistakes and got better, yeah, it just became more and more apparent that a lot of the shooting one-on-one had to be done by me. But then for things like key interviews, master interviews, competitions, events, we always had 2 cameras, a soundy, and yeah, for setup interviews like a gaffer. But we did try and keep it as small as possible, and just like the girls' comfort level was always number one priority. So as little, like, least amount of people as possible, the most relaxed, friendly people as possible. Yeah, just keeping it small and mobile was the key.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. So over these 7 years, as viewers, we're watching these young girls' lives. So much happens to them in this short amount of time. Really, I'm wondering, was there a point in each individual's life that has really stuck with you?
Yeah, absolutely. I think they've all gone through. Like you said, they've had such highs and lows, and the lows have been things that no one their age should really have to deal with.
Yeah.
And the highs have also been the highest of highs, in terms of like international wins at events and things like that. I think 2019 was a rough year for all of them. And for me is probably when 2019, 2020 is when I saw Hayley and Ava, I guess, that childhood innocence sort of leave. And it was tough, I guess, watching them reconcile, things that had happened and seeing them lose that innocence, I guess. And, the thing that we all lose when we go from kids to adults, when life is actually kind of hard and things and difficult things happen, and how do you reconcile that? And for me, that's what the film's about, like reconciling and finding contentment with the people that we become when things don't go our way. Yeah, seeing them, I guess, at times become more withdrawn and a little bit more thoughtful and considered, and seeing them get hurt is never easy. Like, and my heart just breaks for them, sometimes. And every time I watch the film, it breaks again for them. But same with Charlotte. Like, I mean, she's only 17 now, but seeing this tiny little thing competing again and again after all these, at all these big events and under this huge cloud of pressure to prove herself, is just like a crazy idea to me.
Yes, it really
someone
is.
that young could handle that kind of pressure, but she does, and she just adapts and she does well.
Yeah, I've got a couple of questions here which focus on each one of these young girls individually. And you did just touch on Charlotte there, but she was the youngest when you began filming. She was 9. Would you say that you witnessed the biggest transition in Charlotte compared to the others?
That's a good question. Visibly, yes. I would say so. She, Ava as well, they both start as being these pretty rambunctious scallywags, lots of like life and cheekiness. And then over the years, they, become a little bit more quieter, a little bit more reserved. To me anyway, I'm sure with their friends, they're just, as chaotic potentially as they used to be. But I think for Charlotte, for sure, she's gone from being a kid, like a child, to a teenager, whereas the other two went from being young teenagers to adults. I think, though, both Ava and Hayley have really visibly changed, and that's one of the strengths of the film, like showing their change in physical appearance over the years as they go from teenagers to adults.
Tell us about the US camp with Ava, because I started off being quite inspired by it, but I get the feeling it may not have lived up to the hype.
Yeah, that's exactly what happened. She was given this, scouted for this opportunity. They had some parents go over and suss the academy out, and it sounded really great. And, they promised all kinds of things that ultimately they didn't deliver on. And one of the main things being that, Ava's a bowl skater, which is like also park skating. And they said they'd have like an indoor bowl. And when she got there, I could be wrong about this, but I feel like it hadn't even been built yet. And certainly when we got there, it hadn't been built yet. And I mean, she was in Portland. It rains all the time. So yeah, that was one of the things. And I think for her, that was really the beginning, the first sign in the story anyway, that things may not go to plan. And it was a disappointment, and she felt guilty. And, you know, Mum was furious with the academy, and she got some great life skills out of it, absolutely. And you know, made a lot of friends and saw a lot of America. But at the time that they offered her the scholarship, she was also offered a wild card to the X Games in Sydney, and I know she had to decide what she was going to do. And yeah, it's hard to say, like, if she had gone for the X Games wild card, what would have happened. But I hate this phrase, but you know, things, I don't think I even believe it, but people love to say that things happen for a reason. So if she can find some comfort in that, then you know, she can have that.
Yes, yeah. Did you travel to the US with Ava? Were you a part of that filming?
Yeah, we did. So, yeah, we got over to Portland about a week before she was due to come back. And with all of these trips, with all of the girls, everything seems to happen very last minute. We were the last people to find things out, which is fair, but it meant we would have to scrounge for the cash, fly over. And, yeah, we were there for her last week. Just enough time to interview her coaches and get a feel for life on the campus. And then the weather was miserable, and there was hardly anyone on campus, which was actually perfect for the story. And so yeah, we also flew to LA with Charlotte and Hayley for Dew Tour, and we went to London and Paris. So yeah, there was a lot of traveling involved, but it became obvious early on, like, if we're covering this story, these events and the academy are a huge part of their journey. So we're just going to have to commit.
Yes,
and make it happen.
That's interesting, because I did have a question for you about the travel, but I deleted it. But now that I've heard you say this, I do want to ask the question that I originally had. And I don't like talking to filmmakers about budgets. I know it can be quite a personal thing, but I think our emerging filmmaker listeners might get a bit out of you telling us how did you manage to come up with the budgets to do so much traveling?
Yeah, that's a huge question. For this is going to be interesting in that I'm not sure what I'm allowed to say, but I know I'm pretty sure.
Were you applying for funding and things like that, or was it?
We were. Vic Screen were the first ones to really come on and give us some development funding, and I think we used most of that to head over to Portland. But for the rest of the trips, we just scrounged our own cash and tried to pay for flights, and then did whatever we could just to make sure we had enough to get through day to day. A lot of the events had like lunch, meal tickets and things like that. But it was hard. Like, we were begging, borrowing and stealing pretty much to get to these things. But yeah, look, I'm not going to lie, the funding has been really hard, and that's why we've all kept working, so that we can float the film and pay rent and things like that. And I'm not saying that that's a reflection on the industry or anything like that. Like, we've received so much support, especially in the last year or so. But I think part of it is also the fact that we're a green team, first features. So it's, especially in the risk averse, economy that is the film industry right now and everywhere. It is hard. But I think with documentary, and I'll stop rambling in a sec. With documentary, all you really need is a camera. It doesn't need to be a $10,000 camera. We've just been using $3,000 Panasonic camera, and some lavs, a couple of lav mics. And after you've paid for that, that really should be the biggest costs until you are heading overseas. So
yes,
yeah, that's how we did it.
If it gives you any comfort, the film looks $1 million. It looks incredible.
Thank you. Oh, that's too sweet. Thanks. Thank you.
But I did say that I had a question about each one of the girls, and I didn't get to Hayley there. The final question that I had in relation to the three of them individually was, how did you feel watching Hayley at the Olympics?
Oh my God, I couldn't eat. I couldn't sleep the night before. I was really, really nervous, and I was lucky in that I was the one filming Charlotte and her mum in the living room. So I had the buffer of looking through my camera at them and not necessarily watching Hayley at the time. My main thing was that I just, above all else, I just want her to be okay. And I knew she'd be bummed about it and the way that things went down. But yeah, it was really hard to watch. And but luckily, both the team and we came home, we had some wine and just decompressed ourselves. And having gotten to that point in the story that the Olympics actually happen and Hayley actually goes, which is a spoiler, sorry everyone. That was huge in itself and something that we had never been sure would happen. So just had to try and celebrate that milestone and celebrate getting to that point.
Oh, I've really loved chatting with you about the film, and I just want to talk about the future for a little bit here. The film's been accepted into 2 major film festivals in MIF and Cinefest Oz. What does it mean to you to have the film accepted into 2 such prestigious festivals?
It's very, very, very surreal, and without sounding like I'm sucking up to them, MIF have just been such good friends of the film for so many years, and they've known about this film being made for a long time, and they've always told us to apply for the Premier Fund, and even now they're just so supportive of us day to day with our questions and things like that. And they were really like the first ones in recent times to say yes to us. And it wasn't until they did that everyone else came on board. And so I think, we owe everything to them, and I'm really grateful for it. And Cinefest, oh man, I've always wanted to have something play over there. And it's again, to have like the 2 back to back and together is, I just feel so lucky, really grateful. And it's nice. I do have to sit down sometimes when I'm not working or dealing with film stuff and just remind myself there are great things happening, and try and sit in the moment and let myself feel it, as opposed to just running around like a headless chook all the time.
Yes. Are you heading over here for Cinefest Oz?
Yeah, I'd love to. I haven't booked flights yet, but I've always wanted to head over that way. So yeah, for sure.
Great to hear. I have a final question here for you. You open Queens of Concrete by asking Hayley, Ava and Charlotte if there's anything they'd want to say to themselves 8 years ago. I'm wondering, is there anything you'd like to say to your younger self?
Oh, that's such a good question. I would say trust your instincts and be confident in your instincts. And and also just that it's going to be hard and harder than you can imagine, but to keep going. But I think for me, this whole project has just been, a lesson in instincts and learning when to, learning when to trust them, and learning also that it's okay when they're not that obvious and when you just have to bide your time until they show themselves. But I have learned, even really just in the last 12 months, with sitting with editors and people that do this day in, day out, that my instincts are good, and to be confident in that. And it's okay to make mistakes, and sometimes instincts are wrong, but you're never going to know until you actually start making it. So yeah, that would be what I would say.
Beautiful. Eliza, I think that's a great way to wrap this up. I can't thank you enough for sharing these stories with me and our listeners. So thank you very much for joining us, and congratulations on the film again.
Oh, thank you so much. I really appreciate your time and your interest. So thank you, Matt.
Thanks for listening. Find all the latest Australian film news at cinemaaustralia.com.au. You can follow Cinema Australia on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, YouTube and TikTok.